Welcome back. Got a pretty rare one here. 30th anniversary M5. One of only 300 made and only 30 brought over to the States. It was rear-ended really bad. The customer had it repaired somewhere else previously and just brought it in for the paint work. So what I'm going to be doing here is pulling off the paint protection film on this door for a blend. The shop already trimmed out the inside. This is a matte finish, so it's got an additive in the clear that's going to have to be put in it to match the original sheen. This is a used lid, so I'll have to take this off. Let me grab the key. Alright, we've got some of the parts I've taken off already just to see what might have gotten missed. And this seam here did not get sealed along here. I need to seam seal all around here, all down in the light pocket, and a few other places where the seam sealer they put on it didn't quite get it, like right in here. Just didn't quite seal. This lip under here was not rolled. You can see it's still got a 90-degree bend in it. It needs to be rolled around so the tire won't contact the panel and bend it, or cut the tire, or both. So I've got a quarter to paint the deck lid, which is slightly darker. It's a little bit different color. There's a little bit of repair work I'll have to do in a couple spots. But I've got to go around it really good and see what I need to do to that. The rest of the car is in pretty good shape. Got a new bumper for it over here. I have to take this bottom trim out. Need to paint it separately to make sure I get good coverage down in here. We don't have an edge that'll peel. I've got to get the backup sensors out of it, and that'll be basically ready to go. Just need to sand it and clean it up and sand it. So this job will be taken all the way across, blended through here, all the way down with the clear down to here. And this film's already been removed. I got some residue to get off the rest of it where it didn't completely get cleaned off, but not much. There's a slight ding here. Not sure when that happened. It was like that when I picked the car up. But I can work most of that out. Probably with a PDR rod, and then maybe glaze the last little bit of it or just prime it out. A little portion of the wiring, I believe it was right in here somewhere. A little portion of the wiring got skint. I think it's still working. I can coat that with silicone to seal the wiring off. And a few places in here, I got to get up under here and weld this a little bit more solid to the gutter here, and probably re-seam seal right there when I do the rest of it. For right now, I'm going to get the trunk lid fit. It was fit during the repair, but for some reason it was put back on and it wasn't put on properly. So I need to refit it, make sure I can get it to fit. Get the gaps proper. It's too wide over here, a little bit too high. Once I get that done, I can go ahead and strip the spoiler and everything off of it, and then we'll be able to take it off the car. But I'll start with the car, do this together, then I'll do the trunk lid separately off the car and bumper also. Okay, I was planning on going through this area right here and redoing it anyway, but you can see the paint's actually starting to bubble up, like right in here. All these spots are just little bubbles. All those right there. That's a run in the primer. It looks like they put the primer directly to the metal. And unless it was a direct to metal high build primer, then that's the only way it would have been correct. But I still don't like doing that because you don't know for sure that it's going to stick to the bare metal. So I scratched this off with a tungsten block. I'm going to take some lacquer thinner and rub through this and see if I can take the primer off. If I can, it's just a one part, probably a lacquer primer, which never would have lasted very long. I'll go ahead and do that and see what I can take off with a Scotch-Brite and some thinner. All right, I decided to go with a paper towel just to make sure I wasn't sanding it off. I'm not really able to get it to come off. It must be a 2-part primer, but you can see, maybe you can see this right here, where that edge, get you where you can see that, where that edge is bubbled up right there. And it's directly on the metal. And there are straight line scratches in this from the blocking work on the filler. And they just primed straight over that, probably 80 grit. And I can still see scratches like this. You can see straight lines there. All these blocking scratches in these directions. You should never be able to see through the primer to the sand scratches like that. They should have been refined. And even if they had hand blocked it and left it maybe in 180, you wouldn't be able to see it. So that's probably 80 grit scratches if they prime straight over. So I'm gonna have to go all the way through this. At least I'd like to go back to the metal. There shouldn't be a lot of filler here, but I'm gonna take it all the way down to the metal, redo the fill work. That way I can epoxy this area and then reprime it. Okay, I was able to draw the door in just a little bit by moving the striker in. At least it was adjustable enough to do that. This is slightly out at the top, which actually is about the same as the other side. And it's a little bit out right here, the door is. But right in here in the center section, this is all flush. I can't go any further in because that'll expose this edge to chips. So I gotta keep it at least flush or slightly out. It's over here. You can see this, the door is slightly out from the body here, so it's about the same as this side. This one's more even all the way down, but I've gone in as far as I can go. Got the handle out. Basically pull a screw. There's a plug in this slot. Take the Allen head screw out that you see there, and all the way through there's a torque screw going that direction, and that will take, it'll back out a screw that's down in here, and then the handle will pull out of that bracket, and then you can just swing it out, unplug it. There's 2 plugs here on the handle for the LED that's running through it, and probably a touch function. Only thing left is this top trim. And you get that off just so I make sure I can get paint all the way up to the edge. And that'll have the door ready. It's nice and clean since it was wrapped. I just pulled all the film off, so the door doesn't really need to be cleaned other than just a quick wipe down for paint prep. So I've got that finished. I'm gonna work this dent out, and I'll end up having to take all that filler out up there, redo that body work, and then I'll prime this whole panel in a dark primer. It actually calls for a almost nearly black ground coat under this color, so I'll just put down my Value Shade 7 primer. And I'll seam seal all this. This we're not going to worry about painting over since you can't see it, but this in here, I'm going to have to repaint this part of the jamb since this will be visible. As you can see, this seam seal should have come all the way around here. And you can actually see into the car through that corner right there. You can see through it. And this should all be sealed as well. So I'll probably weld some more up here where they only put 1 weld. You can see where they drilled through where they shouldn't have. I'm going to try to weld those to the new quarter and just fill those holes in. But I'll have to drop the hinge. Once I get the trunk lid off, I'll drop the hinge down in the car and I'll get everything out of the way. So that's where we're at now. I'm gonna go ahead and get this rocker molding off. I need to see what they did back there where I can't see. I need to look in here at the repair, make sure nothing's exposed or not sealed there as well. And I need to get that plug out right there, and that'll give me access to see behind where they attached it, and also cavity wax from that point down in the rocker where they seamed it. Okay, rocker trim is off. I've got the bracket hanging here. We got some wiring run through here, so I'm not going to disconnect all this just yet. I can just do the work here and put it back in. This is where they seamed it. You can see the seam right there. And they didn't seam seal where the factory seam sealed right there. They didn't bring any sealer back here. And this is the back side of where they welded the two together, and it's already starting to rust. Hadn't been here but a few weeks probably. And you got a bunch of runs in the primer, you can see all that. So I'll let this dry out. I'm gonna have to blow some air through it to get all the water out of here that's puddled. And then once it's nice and dry, I'll try to put some 415 in there just to seal it off. I can't get the rust out. Once it starts inside a flange like that, you can't get to it. So now I'm gonna get that plug out back there and be able to look in from the backside to see what's back here. I mean, I'm sure it's just a bunch of charred paint and nothing coating it. So I'll do all this first so I can get this piece back on, but it's gonna have to sit here and dry overnight. Then I'll move on to the quarter and get everything sealed up and get this wheel well rolled around. Okay, I've got the trunk lid to fit and went ahead and took it off, so I have access to this area right here that needs to be welded. This was drilled out, so this material is gone. I'm gonna have to add a little piece here to connect these two to stiffen that. And underneath here, there is a few holes. I think I may have shown you this, where this was drilled out from the top. And everything there that's still in the eco color should have been left. That layer, actually those two layers right there, should have been left and welded from the top down to that. So I'm going to try to weld these up solid, and that way it'll weld it to the new quarter. And then I'll have to re-seam seal this. And this was either a drilled alignment hole or a self-tapping screw. It's a little small for a screw, so I think it was just a hole they used to put it back on to realign it when they were test fitting it. So I'll weld that shut. And I've got some welds over here. This was just barely holding. They put a little tack weld in the holes they drilled, and no welds on the end here. You can see where they drilled it off. There's no welds, so I'm gonna have to weld all these up. I think that's the only spots. I've got those three places, those under here, and this. I think that's all the welding I'll have to do. And then what I'll do is I'll take, since this wasn't sanded, you can see the gloss on the e-coat there. That wasn't sanded, so I really need to take this paint back out, because the seam sealer's not gonna, it'll adhere to this paint, but the paint's not really well adhered to the body, so I need to take at least the paint probably from here all the way over to here where I'm gonna seal. I need to take this paint back out. And I've got to clean this flange off. This flange was painted, you can see that. This is supposed to be epoxy only and masked off for the paint job, so I'm gonna take all this back down to the metal in here, take the filler back out so that I can start from scratch down at the repair area. And this will all get epoxied all the way down, and then I can seam seal in here and respray the jams. And this in here, I'll just seam seal. This is not going to be visible, so this will just get seam sealed. Some of this in here was not stuck, so I just scraped it out. I'm just going to take everything that's loose off of it and reseal it. Try to get the car done first so that my glass guy can come back and put the back window in. I'll move on to doing the trunk lid and the bumper off the car. Okay, I've got all the welding done. Went through and welded those up from the bottom, so I had to end up grinding the weld smooth here, so I'll have to put a little fill there. Got them filled in here best I could. Just need to flood the joints here with epoxy just to get in between the flanges. So I've got some of that mixed up. I'm going to draw it up with a syringe. That way I can inject it down under here and let it flow into this seam and come out of the bottom. And also the places where I need some more, like inside here, I can just brush this on with a dauber. That doesn't really need to be sprayed. I'll need to put some color over it, but I can just daub on the epoxy just to seal it off. And seal goes over that anyway. So same thing over here. I had to do some welding at this joint here that was just partially welded, so it actually broke the one weld that was there whenever I pulled this section out. This part of the seal was not touching the trunk. So I'm gonna have to repaint basically from this edge up through the jamb. That's fine. I was probably gonna go all the way across here anyway, so I just gotta go down that way. I'm gonna flood this in just to get between the seams, and then I'll come back and I'll strip. I'm gonna strip this paint out of here because this was never sanded. Then I'll epoxy the outer part all the way down to here, and then all the way up here. This will be back to bare metal, and then I'll redo the body work. So I'm gonna epoxy all that at once, and I'll prime the entire area. Whole quarter get primed, so that primer will go on, and then I'll be able to sand all that and paint directly over it. All right, I've gotten all the filler out of here, and I went around with just a pick hammer here, just testing out these welds, and right in here it just completely caved in. I'm just tapping about this hard, just barely touching it. I think it's okay everywhere else. I still need to brush out the rest of this filler. See a few cracks right there. So it's gonna be hard to grind this out and fill it in. I would have to just tack it till I fill it with filler rod or wire. I'm not sure what happened here. This should be straight across. So something happened here, and this is, I think, a hole too. You can see that starting to cave in. I'm just gonna have to get all this filler out and go back and just tack this together where I know I can trust it, at least for the most part. Okay, I took all the filler out of here. This was so thin and had so many holes in it, I could not weld it up. I had to make a patch that was about 2 inches long right here. It came into the jamb. So I'm taking the filler out right here, and there's a huge hole that was just filled in right there with filler. And it was just regular filler. I don't think it was anything different than what they had on the top. Not fiberglass, reinforced or anything. I don't know if I can fill that. And I'll just have to try. I may have to put a patch in there. But with it being inside the jamb, I could fill this with fiberglass filler and it would be okay with cavity wax, but I'll have to make that decision. I don't want to do any further damage here. I think from here up we're probably good. I'm going to take this filler all the way out. Since I had to come down in here with a patch, I might as well redo this jamb, so I'm stripping it just to find any other issues, and there's a major one there. Okay, I've just about got this finished. I put a layer of Everglass underneath this. This is Evercoat premium filler. I'm going to put a layer of glaze over this because I need glaze, plus I want to seal all the metal off until I can get everything stripped and ready to go for primer. That way this can't be flash rusting while I'll do the rest of the work, and I'll come back and I'll block the glaze right here at the very end right before I'm ready to prime. I still have to go in and roll this fender lip, so I may have a little bit of glaze to put out here on this edge, and then I've got a strip. I don't like how this looks here, so I'm probably going to strip this down to metal and just go ahead and epoxy across this bottom part here when I do this flange here. This is going to stay bare metal. Then I'll epoxy all of this in here, all down in this gutter and this entire panel. Then I'll prime this panel to give me something to sand. Since I don't have the sealer for this paint line that he bought, I'm just going to prime it. That way I can let it cure and sand it, paint right on top of it. But I've still got to go down and possibly go into the body work down at the bottom. I may leave that. This is more important since it's going to be out in the sun here. But I'm going to glaze this and then strip everything else I need to strip. Come back and block that last. Okay, I've swapped sides with these cars. I've got the M5 over here in the paint area now. I just went through and rolled this edge. This had a 90-degree bend in it. Went ahead and rolled that. That wasn't done. There's very minimal warpage out here. And there's one spot here that didn't get welded. This place right here where the bumper grommet goes in this square hole. This area right here was originally welded to the inner wheel well, or outer wheel well. And I was able to get a grinding wheel in there. They left a little bit of a weld nugget there where I couldn't bring it up flush in contact, so I stuck a grinding wheel through there, knocked it down, and then hit both sides with the wheel. Now I'm going to inject some panel bond just so I don't have to get under here and try to weld this, because I'd have to drill a hole and I would burn this panel. What I'm going to do is just, now that I've got it bent down a little, I'll put panel bond in there and I'll squeeze it and hold this together overnight, and I can go ahead and seam seal all of this. I can actually seam seal around that, most likely around the clamp, but I might just wait till it's completely cured and come back and seam seal it with everything out of the way. Okay, body work's done, ready for primer. Just got to get it masked off. Went ahead and took the front door off, that way I can paint all the way under here and blend down this B-pillar just a little, and take the paint all the way down inside here and blend it down to this hinge. There won't be any line in here, and the door will be out of the way. I won't have to mask it. It was just as easy to take it off as to mask it off, and it'll be a better job. It's just 2 bolts, 1 in each hinge, the connector and the strap, and it lifts right off. No big deal. I've got this fender lip rolled. I'm going to wait until I get the primer on, that way everything can be curing while I do the seam sealer. Seam sealer will go behind here to seal the outer to the wheelhouse, and I'll come around here with the seam sealer all under here where it was never done, all the way up, and I've scuffed this edge here where it'll stick. Even though this wasn't sanded, the seam sealer will stay here as long as nothing's here to disturb it. Come around here with it, and then this will be visible seam sealer here, here, and over here, so I got to put a different type there. I'm going to try to use the 5887 that will kind of self-level, be a little neater looking. I'm going to get this masked, and then I'll mix up the primer, that way while I take lunch it'll do its induction time and I can come back and spray it. Alright, we are ready to prime. I'm going to get everything in bare metal, covered with epoxy. Almost everything you see here will be epoxy, but I'm not going to go down in here or over here. I'm just going to hit the metal, the entire outer quarter, and I'm going to try to get, after I do this jam, I'm going to try to go back in here and spray from this direction to get a little bit of that edge, a little more than you would from the outside. And once that is flashed for about an hour, I'll come back and I'll tape. I'll probably use blue painter's tape just to make sure I don't stick too hard to it, but I need to cover this entire mounting flange here for the glass all the way to where I stopped it, so that I can stay in just epoxy. You either want it to be an E-coat or epoxy for the glass to go over it. And since you have to weld this is going to be in bare metal, at least in several places, so you might as well take it all the way down. But either way, you want to have just epoxy or E-coat under the glass urethane, nothing else. So after I get that masked off, after the flash time, I'll do about 3 coats of high build primer out here, and then some down in this jam where I've got a little bit of filler over those welds I had to do. And then this will get seam sealed after everything's nice and cured overnight. That seam, and I got one over here, right there. But I can go ahead and seam seal everywhere else before the primer is fully cured. I just can't seam seal over that primer without it being fully cured. So I'm going to get the epoxy in the gun now and get this on here so it can be sealed off. Then I'll have to wait about an hour before I can mask the flanges off and get the high build on it. Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to spray the outer surfaces, like this outer E-coat portion first. That way any of the overspray from the gun angle from the inside of the jam there, well, that overspray will land on something wet. I'll get the best adhesion on the outside. like I said, after about an hour, I'll come back and tape off this flange right here where the glass is going to go. And now that the metal is sealed off, we shouldn't have any more issues with having to keep anything from rusting. I'll be back when I get ready for the primer. Okay, ready for primer. I've got blue painter's tape on this that I've just barely stuck down. This has been drying for a little over an hour. As soon as I get that last coat of primer on, I'm going to pull this so that it doesn't leave any residue in it. And I'll clean it really well before we bind the glass in, and then we'll scuff that with a scuff pad between these two areas here that I stopped the urethane. So it's just bare metal under here, under the epoxy. So that'll get scuffed right before the glass goes on. I've got a soft edge over here. Since I don't want a bunch of primer in the jam to have to sand, I'm going to stop it here. And that way I've got a soft edge in it. I can just scuff over that and you won't see it. I do need primer in here though, so I stopped the paper and left it loose so that this overspray will go into here. And I don't want to come all the way to this edge. This is back masked and rolled over, but I'm going to try to stop the primer about an inch short of that. And I do need primer back here since I do have filler on the back side. So I'm going to put one coat over the entire area, a second coat over most everywhere, and then where I only need 2 coats, right down in this area, there's really no damage or scratches or anything I had to fill, so I really only need 2 coats where I just need something to sand. But where I've got filler, like right there and up here, and where I had a little dent there, I need 3 coats for sure, just to be able to block it out. Okay, I've got the 3 coats. You can see where I only put an additional coat where I needed it. I had a small spot here that needed some, the ding, then the repairs around the arch. That's just going to give me some to block. I only had filler right in the corner. And there was a small little wave right in here, so I put 3 coats from this main body line up. I'm going to leave all of this just to protect the interior, and we'll go ahead and start seam sealing back here. Since I don't have primer back there, I can go ahead and seam seal that. And bring the seam sealer all the way around here and come up in this pocket. I'll just have to unmask this back part. But I'll do all the seam sealer that doesn't necessarily need paint over it, that won't be seen. And that'll leave this spot here, right in here, and the 2 at the very back, right there and right there. That'll be visible. And I'm going to put this on after the primer is completely cured, where I can scuff it down. And I've got to mask off my epoxy right here so I don't get any seam sealer up where the glass will bond. So I'm going to tape it back off right here where the paint's going to stop, and I'll seam seal right there and press it into that seam, flatten it out, and then out here I'll actually try to leave a raised bead similar to what's over here. I can't reproduce this very easily, but I'll put a nice straight bead on it with some tape. I'm going to go ahead and start in the wheel well, that way I can get the wheel back on it, and if I have to move it around, the wheel will be on it. I'm going to try to leave it here so I can paint it, but if I need to get the car out for some reason, I'll be able to move it. Okay, quick update. Got all this sanded out. I still need to feather this in a little bit right here. Still got some guide coat on it. But I'll pull all this back when I get ready to paint it, and I'll feather that in with 600 right in here. I'm going to be doing the jam, and I'll end up running over somewhere into here where I can stop it behind this trim molding, and that's the only visible spot right in there with the rocker molding on it. I'm going to leave it on the lift and leave the wheel off so I can back mask in here. What I'm going to do is get all the way into where I've got full coverage with all the color. I'm going to come back. I'm going to wet sand any dust out of the outside. Since I can't cut any dust out of the clear on this stuff, I'm going to have to make sure I keep it nice and clean. So I'll get the color on it, then I'll wet sand the outside where there's any dust with 1000 grit, then I'll hit it with one more coat of base. So that's pretty much ready to go, just needs to be masked. The bumper had a lot of scratches in it from being set on the floor or ground or wherever, like on these bottom edges. Had a few scratches in here, and I just sanded those out. and not a big deal since I need to go ahead and match the ground coat to the car. So I'm going to put Value Shade 7 primer on this, as well as this piece. It had a few scratches in it. I may only spot prime this. There was one deep one here, and the 4 corners already been set on the floor. And there was some in here like it had been dropped. So that side pretty much all needs to be primed, and then I've got a couple places in here in that spot. It's almost the whole thing. I might as well just prime the whole thing. I may do that if I have enough primer. I'm gonna do it last. And he also wants to paint the reflectors that he bought. He's got a body color match these. These are for the front. You know, the bumper right in here, and these go in the rear bumper. These are already prepped, and I shaved off the lettering that was molded in, and then wet sanded it down flat and scuff padded the rest of it. So that, since I don't have adhesion promoter for this paint line that he brought me, I'm going to prime these with it. That'll give me the same undercoat color, and I'll just paint those with the bumper with this one. So what I'm going to have to do is, what I'm going to try to do anyway, is paint the quarter and the door together. That way I get the blend done, but I'm going to have to do the door off the car, and then I'll paint the bumper and the lower valence back there probably last, because I want to go ahead and get the trunk lid done in between the quarter and the bumpers. That way I can go ahead and put the trunk lid on and seal the car up. So it'll probably be quarter and door, and then I'll do the trunk lid separately. That way I try to keep all this clean, do it all at once. You get a lot of dust built up, and this stuff will be last. I still have the spoiler I need to prep, which is over here with this other car laying there. I need to prep that, and then I'll get that tape replaced on the bottom of it. That way I don't have to try to scrape the tape off the bottom while it's painted. Okay, I've got 2 coats of primer on the bumper here, laid out nice and smooth. Didn't really need a lot of build. I just needed to build up over all my feather edges and get it in this darker color. So I'll just DA sand most of this and then hand sand the rest, which won't be a whole lot. Next thing is going to be to do some spray out cards. I need to spray the base coat. I got 4 cards here. I'm going to clean these, and they're so similar to that value shade that I'm not going to worry about priming this. This is probably a shade 6 or so, and that's a 7, so it'd be close enough. Going to spray the base coat at 4 different pressures. Probably, it calls for 28 or 29 on the can, but that's typically old information from what I've seen on cans that I use with my stuff. But I'm going to do probably 18, 20, 22, 24, or maybe shift it a little bit to 26 psi, and then put the same amount of paint I'm going to put on the car on these spray out cards, and I'm going to take them over to the door, the rear door that I took off here that I know is original. I'm going to see what's the best match to that. Of course, these will be clear coated as well, but I'll use the clear formula they call for in the BASF tech sheet, so that should give me the exact right sheen that I need. But the variable will be the base coat pressure. And if I can get it dead on, I'll just paint the quarter in this jam and put the door back up here. And if I've got a good match, I'll leave it. We're trying to save that original paint if we can. If it's off, then I'll go ahead and just do the same pressure I used on the card to blend a little bit into the door, and then re-clear with 1 coat of clear. Essentially be all you need. This high solid clear here really is good at one thick coat. I may do too thin if I have to. I'll definitely put 2 coats on this. But we're going to see if we can save the color on the original door. I've got the little chips here from just closing the trunk primed out. There was 1 chip up here in the corner that I don't think the paint would have filled, so I went ahead and did that. And this is already close enough that I can just scuff it, go straight to base coat on that. So the next thing will be doing the spray out cards. And as soon as I get a pressure match for the card there, I'll spray the quarter at that pressure.